What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. So, we were kind of waiting for the right time to talk about this kind of video. We were trying to get it done last week, but we just have had a whole busy week, and we're trying to get some other stuff done. So, but finally, we feel like we're in the right kind of mind frame and the right space here in order to make this video happen. So, again, with the Carson Wentz stuff going on and everything else, everyone has been talking about, again, who is to blame for what is going on with the Indianapolis Colts right now. We've been talking about it. They're missing some guys at very important positions. You're questioning how the team is being coached. You're questioning the guys that are on the field. You got a whole lot of different things here, right? And we could kind of talk mainly about Chris Ballard, and he was talking in his presser that, the players were not ready to play in those games, and that he took emphasis on that, saying that's his fault for not getting this right. Again, I don't know if that's the GM's problem to make sure that the team is ready. I feel like that should be managed down at the player and coaching level. Which might say more than what we're letting on. But Cody, I'm going to let you start with this. I know that you've been itching to want to get this video out for a while. What is going on here with the management group? And, should we start having the conversation of Reich and Ballard being potentially on the hot seat from here on out?
So this is a video I've been wanting to do for a long time now. The last couple weeks, I've really been sitting on this, kind of gathered my thoughts a little bit on what I think the Colts, who's to blame, all that stuff. And so I really am excited to talk about this one today. But, man, I think it's got to start with the GM. I think it does because Chris Ballard has, completely, let's be honest, he's whiffed on some key important positions. You look at some of the Super Bowl contenders. You look at the Rams. You look at the Bengals. What did they do well? Right? What was ultimately the reason they were in the Super Bowl? Number one, they had their quarterback, which the Colts don't have. Number two, they had pass rush, which the Colts didn't have. And number three, they had some weapons for their quarterback, which the Colts didn't have. So you see a trend here.
And before anyone gets triggered by that statement, we know Jonathan Taylor is a weapon. Stop using that as an excuse. We're talking about receivers and tight ends here.
Yes, people apparently want to hear what they want to hear, but wide receiver, tight end. Colts don't have that outside of Pittman. Nobody. I mean, my goodness, you could probably say that Michael Pittman on either of these teams would not be their number one, clearly. Maybe not even their number two. That's kind of how bad it is. And I blame that on GM. I blame that on Chris Ballard because he has had opportunities to make these things happen. He has had plenty of opportunities. And what did he do last offseason? He sat on his hands. He didn't go address wide receiver. He didn't go address pass rusher. When there were so many guys that were available, he just sat on his hands. He could have gotten Matt Stafford. What did he do? He traded a first for Carson Wentz. Now we're talking about potentially trading this guy after 1 year. It was a terrible offseason last offseason for Chris Ballard. This team got worse. It got worse.
Yep.
And you signed Eric Fisher, and he was awful. So now you're still, after another season, have questions at quarterback for what, fourth, fifth year? Have questions at left tackle for another year. Still can't get a consistent pass rush. And you're sitting there outside of the playoffs, and you don't even have a first-round pick. Something's got to give, man. Something's got to give. Now, obviously, the Colts felt like they did not like their the certain position coaches, right? Brian Baker got the chopping block. The entire defensive staff was gone. Now, I know they went with Matt Eberflus. I have a feeling they probably would have been gone, a lot of them, because, this team was not ready to play a lot of times. And, the Colts have a lot of new guys here that they're bringing in coach-wise. And Robert Mathis has he's been vocal about how he doesn't even believe the Colts need to bring in another pass rusher. I don't necessarily agree with that, but he thinks they just need to bring in the right coach, which tells you how little he thought of Brian Baker.
Yeah.
That's on the coaching staff. That's on the head coach. That's on Frank Reich. This team has had constant moments where it has not been prepared in key moments, right? They had to win one game between the Raiders and the Jaguars, and they blew both games. That's a coaching problem right there. That's a lack of accountability problem right there. I blame that on the coaching staff. I blame that on Frank Reich. I think the talent is there for Chris Ballard. I think he's done a really good job. And I know you told me not to go on a tangent here, so I'll try to calm it down a little bit.
You're good.
But I think he's done a good job, at least from a core standpoint, getting some core good players. This team was primed for a playoff push, and they blew it 2 weeks in a row. They blew it. I blame that partially on not being able to, the things I talked about, not being able to have consistent play at quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, or pass rush. But I also have to put the blame on the coach because they weren't ready. They have not won in Jacksonville, Derek, since this regime started. They are winless against the Jaguars. The Jaguars, who have had the first overall pick 2 years in a row now. They can't beat them in Jacksonville. That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable. That is disgusting. That is almost fireable right there alone.
And then I'll interject on that real quick, just to kind of give you an olive branch there. Obviously that goes into coaching, right? Obviously it does, because, coaching has to get you ready for that kind of moment. You have to know, we're going into Jacksonville. We have not beaten them in 6 years. We haven't beaten them since I've been coach. It's about time we start changing the tide here. Especially since we're a playoff team. They're the worst team in the NFL. We need to win this.
Yes.
And yet it continues to be that way every year, but yet the Colts just can't do it. Now, it's a point where, obviously, like I said, it's coaching. But how much emphasis on that goes on the players? Where's the pride? Where's the pride in saying, we're going to step up and we're going to destroy this team? Where is that fire? Where is that edge? Because it just doesn't seem to ever be there when they play Jacksonville.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand it. It's so odd that happens. This team just was limping around, And honestly, I'm kind of glad that they lost, because it kind of shows the BS that's been going on for too many years now. And I'll just say this, Derek, if this crap continues, if the Colts continue to lose in Jacksonville, oh, by the way, they also haven't won an opener since Frank Reich has been coach.
Yep.
So that's 2 losses automatically right there every single year. And Chris Ballard really hasn't helped him out either. I mean, honestly, hasn't really helped him out on offense. I mean, the Colts honestly thought this, Derek, that bringing back a T.Y. Hilton, who was injured half the year, relying on Zach Pascal, relying on Paris Campbell, who plays 2 games a year, was good enough to help Carson Wentz out. You can have your opinions on Carson Wentz. I think he's pretty erratic. He has times where you're just like, what are you doing, dude? If they move on, whatever. But I think, and this is the argument people have made, Carson Wentz has not had enough weapons. I think that's a valid argument, Derek, because Chris Ballard had an opportunity to go get players. He has another opportunity this offseason to go get players. And I'm just going to say this, Derek. If Chris Ballard thinks, he said it in his end of the year presser, right? He said, yeah, I think our wide receiver position is really good. I'm like, Chris, just stop. If you truly believe that and you don't go address it again, I want you out of Indianapolis. Dude, you are so stuck in your philosophy. If you're not willing to make a change there and go help out your team, then you obviously don't care about winning and you need to be gone. I want a new GM.
And then on top of it, when people have been talking about Phillip Rivers and been talking about Wentz and how they compare, I mean, let's be honest. The offensive line that Rivers had, a million times better than what Carson Wentz had. Again, Carson Wentz had times where he definitely held on to the ball too long. That's for sure. But at the same time, Carson Wentz in his first 2 games had both his tackles out. Both. And he was getting pressured by Seattle's defensive front, who doesn't really have anyone, and then had to go and face the Rams. The Rams defensive front with Eric Fisher just coming off of an Achilles injury, and then Braden Smith being out, and had Julian Davenport on one side. Come on, man. And then Quentin Nelson's been wasn't the best form of himself. Ryan Kelly's been out all year. I mean, Glow had to be the best one this year by a long shot at times. I mean, it's and compared to Phillip Rivers, where he had like maybe 10 snaps all year where the starting 5 offensive line didn't play together. Like that, yeah, like that is not supposed to be something significant. But let's kind of break this down real quick. So you mentioned it with the wide receiver group. Ballard mentioned in his presser and also said in his interview, I believe is with Kevin Bowen, when asked about the wide receiver position, he has said that he does not believe that the wide receiver group needs a major upgrade. Okay, well, let's look at that statement here quick. So let's assume Michael Pittman makes another leap somehow. Assume. Even after having 80 catches for over 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns, let's see if he makes another leap. Okay, that catapults him into maybe the top 30 wide receiver conversation there. Okay, that works for me. Okay. Well, you have a T.Y. Hilton who's contemplating retirement. And like you said, he, even if he plays, never stays healthy. Never stays healthy. Over the last 3 seasons, that's been an issue for him. And Paris Campbell, same way. I love Paris Campbell and what he can provide you. Only problem is you still can't trust him to stay on the field for very long. Until we can actually see him stay on the field, you can't rely on him. You just can't. And then I'm hoping that changes coming this next year. And Zach Pascal, again, Pascal's a very good number 3 or 4 wide receiver, but we don't need a number 3 or 4 wide receiver. We have plenty of those. We don't need 3 and 4 wide receivers. We need a number 1 or a number 2. We need someone like that. And the thing is, we're talking about Ashton Dulin. Okay, great. Ashton Dulin provides you a deep threat, right? Well, how often do they use him? They don't use him very often. So again, that goes back on if Ballard thinks that Ashton Dulin is a savior for this team, then tell Frank Reich to start game planning with him. Like, that's the thing. Frank Reich needs to use him more. We've been talking about it all along. This whole season, I don't know whether it was Wentz or whether it was the game plan designed by Marcus Brady and Frank Reich, but they rarely used Nyheim Hines. They rarely used Ashton Dulin. The guys that give you big plays that Phillip Rivers was able to utilize the year prior, I don't know how you don't use them again. I just don't get it. I mean, Nyheim Hines was the best pass-catching running back in all the NFL in 2020, and in 2021, he was a complete ghost. Like, they just didn't use him. I mean, Jonathan Taylor was used more in the passing game than Nyheim Hines, and that's criminal. That's criminal. Not saying that Jonathan Taylor can't be used, but Nyheim Hines is your guy. And so that's the one thing. I think a lot of people have different opinions on how the Colts should address it. Whether it should be addressed in free agency by going and getting a big name guy, or whether that means drafting one in the 2nd round this year. Which, I mean, if we're being honest, the top 12 wide receivers in this draft, plenty of really good wide receivers to be able to put into this system that could really help you. But, again, I think, and especially for another weapon in tight end too, you don't know what you're going to get in Jack Doyle. Molly Cox has been inconsistent, and Granson's not ready yet. So, you know, it is very frustrating to hear your GM state when your best wide receiver has 1,100 yards receiving this last year, and your next best wide receiver has 350. And tells you there's not a problem there.
Yeah, it's almost a slap to the face. Like, that is a slap to the face on everything that, you know, like, I get it. You're the GM. You can make those decisions, whatever. But, like, the proof is in the pudding. You see it. Like, it's so obvious to everyone. And the fact that, like, he's just brushing it off like it's not a big deal, no wonder fans are ticked off. Like, yeah, it is a big deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is a big deal. It is 100% a big deal. And it needs to be addressed. Yeah. It needs to be. It cannot be. And it's the same thing that I've been saying with this defensive line. Now, obviously, Robert Mathis, we all saw the tweet saying that he firmly believes that there is not a single upgrade that needs to be made to this defensive line. He believes you get the right defensive line coach, and this becomes a great defensive line front. Okay, well then if that's the case, then Ballard needs to do a better job of finding ways to get a defensive line coach into Indianapolis. We have been hearing a lot recently that the Colts have not been getting some of these big name coaches, position coaches, and have oftentimes been getting turned down because of the stubbornness shown by Chris Ballard and the management staff. Like, they have gone to the point where they don't want to commit to these guys long term. They don't want to commit to these guys long term. They don't want to give them the benefits that they want. They don't want to go out and get the big names and give them what they want in return for coming here and doing what's necessary. And that totally sounds like, the Chris Ballard that we know, again, just sticks to his philosophy where he just thinks it's his way or the highway when it comes to certain hires. I mean, if that's the case, that defensive line coaches are turning you down because you're, being stubborn in how you're handling this situation, then again, Ballard, a wake-up check, bro. It's time to stop. It goes both ways here. You have lost everyone on your defensive side. Brian Baker had to go, but you have to find somebody to replace him, and you got to find someone good. Because if you don't find the right one, then this team needs a better defensive edge guy that has been proven to be good.
But even like with, I can understand the argument for defensive line because look at what you've invested in it, Like, look at all the guys you invested. Look at and compare that to wide receiver, where you've literally drafted 2 guys. Other than that, you've not invested anything into wide receiver of note, So the fact that he says everything's fine at wide receiver, that just almost is borderline insane to me that you would say that, because like you have to invest somewhere. Even at defensive line, the Colts went out and they traded for DeForest Buckner. So they have a guy that's being paid on that defensive line. And I feel like wide receiver, if Chris Ballard seriously sat through the playoffs and didn't notice the common trend that we noticed, with the wide receivers, then I don't know what else to do, man. I really don't. I'm at a loss for words if we don't go out and upgrade at wide receiver, because I think it's a must. I don't think we just need to upgrade one. I think we need to get 2 guys in here to make an impact. Honestly.
Oh yeah, even if it's one receiver and one tight end, that's enough for me to say that okay, you leveled up at each position. But then again, going back to the defensive end group here, I mean, again, you talked about what they have invested. What have they gotten in return? Nothing yet from these guys. Now, you're talking about guys like Kemoko Turay, right? We think, well, at least I think, I don't know how you think. I'll let you decide on that. You can talk about that here in a second. I think Gus Bradley's defense for Kemoko Turay actually has a chance for Kemoko Turay to actually thrive on this defensive line. I think with the Leo position, I think that Kemoko Turay fits perfectly into that scenario. And hopefully we get a defensive line coach that says using Kemoko Turay on 20% of the snaps is criminal. It's criminal, especially on pass rushing situations. And you drafted guys like Ben Banigou, right? That hasn't worked out. Tyquan Lewis, he started to improve, but then has been getting hurt. Obviously got hurt this last year in the middle of the season at a very terrible time, by the way. And then, you're looking at guys like Kwity Paye and Dio Dengbo, who, again, a lot of us have confidence in their ability and what they can potentially do. But that's the big term there. Potential. There's potential, but there is no results. Results is what I want to see now. I don't want to wait 3 more years for Kwity Paye and Dio Dengbo to finally break out. I want results now, because this defense is getting toasted in the fourth quarter because you can't get consistent pressure at the end of games when your best pass rusher on your team is your defensive tackle who's playing 95% of the snaps and it's just not, and it's tired by the end of the game, and it's just not working for you. It's not.
How many more years, Derek, are we going to say the Colts need to address these positions before there's a change made? You know what I mean? Like, if we continue to say the Colts need a quarterback, they need a left tackle, they need a pass rush, they need weapons. If we continue to say that offseason after offseason, something's got to give, man. Something's got to give. I'm just going to say that because, like, we have said this now, and I understand there's going to be people who are going to say, well, your left tackle retired, your quarterback retired. I understand that.
Yeah.
Part of being a GM is figuring those things out, whatever it takes to figure those things out. Okay, quarterback's a little bit harder to figure out. The Colts took a shot at Wentz, didn't really work out. But in terms of like left tackle, in terms of pass rush, you've had plenty of opportunities. In wide receiver, you'd have plenty of opportunities to upgrade it. You just have elected to just not for whatever reason. Or an immediate upgrade, I'll say. So I don't know, man. I'm very frustrated with Chris Ballard right now. I think he's a great GM. It's so frustrating because I think he's a good GM. I think he's a really great talent evaluator. Yes. But if he can't be willing to change his philosophy here, like I'll give credit to Matt Eberflus. He was willing to change his philosophy, and look what happened for the second half of the season. For the most part, this defense showed great signs of improvement. But if your leadership can't do that, then you're just going to be stuck in the mud, and you're just going to be constantly year after year sitting outside of the playoffs or first round exits. That's what's going to happen, Derek. And that's what's happened so far.
Every Colts fan knows that the weapon situation on the offense is suffering, but yet Chris Ballard states that that's not an issue. Again, I don't know if he's playing his card. I don't know if he's holding the deck down to make sure that nobody knows what he's going to potentially go for. But we've heard him say it before, and he doesn't say things unless he truly means what he's saying. And, it's scary that, we could go into this offseason and see more of last year's offseason. And, I mean, again, we look at last year's offseason. That offseason was atrocious when you look at it from the very end of things. The left tackle that you signed, here's the funny thing. They may have to re-sign him because what else on the left tackle market is there for you to get? There's nothing. The left tackle group, I mean, and we'll make a video on this here shortly, but when you're talking about it, really there's only like one or two guys that are even worth your time. But the only thing that sucks is they're either extremely overpaid or they're old. It's a kind of thing where it's like, you might have to roll with Eric Fisher for another year. You may have to, just because of the situation that you're in right now. You can't upgrade quarterback, left tackle, pass rush, wide receiver, tight end, corner all in one offseason. You can't do that. You have to pick and choose which positions matter most on this team to get them to move forward. And unfortunately, you may have to stick with Eric Fisher for another year. Who knows if he's going to improve? I doubt it, but we'll see what happens. But again, it's one of those things. I really don't know what to expect this year, Cody, because, we went into last offseason content-wise, we were hungry for some content, man. We were thinking, man, this is going to be it. This is the time that the Colts start making a move here. And, we end up with Carson Wentz. Thought it was pretty good at the time. Hasn't turned out great so far. Eric Fisher, left tackle, very disappointing season. And you retained a lot of your defensive guys. And that's the bliss of it. I mean, There's nothing more to add to that. And you're right. With as many defensive ends that there were available last year, that you could have easily went and got one, but you didn't. You held on to that money. And, your pass rush is still lacking. You had wide receivers available last offseason. You have a lot of them this season. And, you're sitting pretty on that money, and it's time to improve it. It's time to improve it. And I will be honest, I'll say this, if Ballard does not improve the tight end or receiver position in any way, shape, or form, then yes, I will immediately put Ballard on the hot seat. Because if this
He
team
deserves
doesn't
it.
improve in the weapons wise of using those, then yes, Ballard immediately needs to be on the hot seat because it shows that he would be unwilling to accept that there's a position that needed help and he refused to address it.
Yep. And that's the harsh reality with this because we said it, like, we like Chris Ballard, like we think he's a good
Look at
GM.
the guys he has drafted. Look at the guys he
Yeah.
has brought in. I mean, he brought in Quentin Nelson. He brought in Darius Leonard. He brought in Braden Smith. All in the same freaking draft. He brought in Julian Blackman, who we think is going to be a great player. Kari Willis and Bobby Okereke. They're both turning into pretty good studs. Isaiah Rodgers is now figuring it out. He's a fifth-round corner, and you look at Rock Yassin. He's finally figuring it out. You've got guys that have shown potential and guys who have thrived in this league. You have quite possibly the best linebacker in the league. You have one of the best defensive tackles in the league on this team. You have a young secondary that you feel confident with good coaching, especially with the secondaries coach that you just got, or the linebackers coach that you just got, is going to help with the linebackers in coverage. You hope that whoever you hire is going to be able to get these young secondary guys into a position moving forward.
My list is going to.
Yeah. And then, the offensive line is built the right way. You got Michael Pittman, which is great, but again, you've seen what did the Bengals do? Okay, I kind of like to reiterate it because they're built completely different than how the Colts were this last offseason. Who did they go and get? They signed 2 free agents on their defensive line. DJ Reader, who we know very well, is playing with the Texans the year prior, and Trey Hendrickson, with their sack leader. They signed into a 5-year deal worth $60 million. Like, you're telling me Trey Hendrickson, 14 sacks this year. Man, I mean, he was a wrecking ball for the back half of that year. He was the man on the outside. DJ Reader, one of the best defensive tackles stopping the run in the league this year. And then they got Jesse Bates, who they drafted. They brought in Awuzie. They brought in Eli Apple. They drafted Logan Wilson, who immediately is the best coverage linebacker in the NFL, apparently, and as a rookie. I mean, it's insane. The guys they brought in free agency on that defensive line and brought in the secondary, and then who they drafted. They've been drafting weapons. They've got weapons. They got weapons and weapons and weapons and weapons. I mean, right now, Tyler Boyd, their third wide receiver, arguably is their 4th most efficient target. He would be the number 2 wide receiver on this Colts wide receiver staff easily. You could potentially say he might even be number 1 if you gave him the ball enough times.
Yep.
Because he didn't drop the freaking football. Michael Pittman dropped the football a few times. Tyler Boyd dropped 1 football this year.
Yep.
1.
Yep. So, I mean, we'll see. It could be a smokescreen, like you said. We'll see exactly what Chris Ballard does. But I think if he sits on his hands again and thinks this team is good, Jim Irsay's not happy. So I don't think Jim Irsay is going to stand for it.
Right.
And if this team continues to be mediocre and Chris Ballard does not take the steps necessary in order to go get a guy and make a difference this year and, stop being that 9-8 football team and be a playoff contender, if he doesn't do that, man, like, the Colts are going to have no choice than to move on from him because they're just going to be mediocre for the next decade. And we don't want that. And Jim Irsay clearly doesn't want that. So, yeah, a lot of changes are going to need to be made, man, if indeed the Colts continue to struggle, continue to blow games they should win, and continue to lose in Jacksonville. I'll just leave on this, Derek. In the Chris Ballard tenure, the Colts have 1 playoff win, 0 division titles, 0 wins in Jacksonville, 0 opener wins, 0 wins the first game of the season. That is inexcusable. That is ridiculous. And if things don't change, if Chris Ballard doesn't change his philosophy here, unfortunately, Colts fans, we're going to have to deal with more of the same for the next couple of years until the Colts decide to move on from him. That's
Yep.
just my opinion. I hope that Chris Ballard changes his philosophy. I hope the Colts go out and get weapons. They get pass rush. They do some things to help their team now. Because, this team, they're starting to get into their window, right? For a potential like Super Bowl run. Like some of their guys are starting to get older. So the time is now. The time is now.
Yeah, and Frank Reich, same for him as well. I mean, some of these situations, you talked about it with with the season openers and play in Jacksonville. It's time that the Colts start winning the games that they should be winning. Like it's time that they start doing that. We can't keep having these excuses. We can't go into next season, and I do not want to continue to hear Frank Reich say that he's taken blame for how the offense did not go effectively. I'm sick and tired of hearing that excuse. I hear it 6 times a season when the offense doesn't know what to do. And then Frank Reich says that's on me for not getting this team prepared. Well, either you start getting them prepared or we find somebody that actually will get them prepared. I mean, it's the reality of the situation that we're in. Again, I know that everyone's saying, who would you replace him with? Again, I'm not ready to replace Frank Reich. But again, if I'm hearing the same excuse 100 times over, saying that he's the one that's not getting this team prepared, then maybe it's time that Chris Ballard started having a talk with Frank Reich and said, "Hey, man, like, what do we need to do to fix this? Because it needs to be done now." So we'll see what happens here. Hopefully this offseason and then going into next season, we'll see some improvements. Let us know in the comments, guys, what you think of the situation. Do you think Ballard and Reich should be on the hot seat? Do you think that they should be given more time? What do you think needs to be done? If anything, let us know in the comments. Thank you guys again so much for the continued support. Hope you enjoyed. And as always, go Colts.